Welcome to the Liberal Democrat Christian Forum. LDCF is a Christian voice in the Liberal Democrats and a voice of liberal democracy among Christians. We're a group of people united in our belief in a God who cares deeply about justice. So much so that he sent his son Jesus, who through his death and resurrection might restore our relationship with him and put the world to rights. We want to speak out against injustice, impact policy, and create lasting change that demonstrates the love that God has for his people. We act as a bridge between the party and the Christian church. Through our fringe events and lectures, we build relationships and encourage both communities to connect and work together. As part of Christians in Politics, we want to inspire Christians to become more politically engaged. Decisions are made by those who show up. Alongside our friends in other parties, we run talks and events seeking to persuade Christians to get involved in politics and seek justice for their community and nation. A member of our team will be here at several points throughout the day to say hello, have a chat, and answer any questions you may have. At this conference, we want to draw attention to the importance of protecting freedom of religion or belief around the world. Freedom of religion is under threat across the globe, whether it is Christians in North Korea, Afghanistan or Somalia, Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, or atheists in Indonesia. We want to see a world free of religious persecution, where everyone has the right to practice the religion or belief of their choice, or to choose not to practice one at all. On Saturday at 1:05 p.m, join us for our fringe event, The Forgotten Human Right, Freedom of Religion or Belief, where you can hear from experts from Christian Solidarity Worldwide and Humanists International. We'd love to see you there. You can contact us by emailing office@ldcf.org and join us by going to the web address on your screen now. Thanks for listening and hope to see you soon.
Good evening, conference, and welcome back to the auditorium. I've been really pleased that in recent conferences we've been able to include even more of the voices of local government. So I'm delighted to welcome Councillor Joe Harris, leader of the Lib Dem group on the Local Government Association and leader of Cotswolds District Council. Joe.
Hi, I'm Councillor Paul Hodgkinson. I'm leader of the Liberal Democrats on Gloucestershire County Council. And today I'm joined by my friend, colleague and mentee, I hope I can say that, Councillor Joe Harris. Joe is the leader of Cotswold District Council and he's also been recently elected as leader of the LGA Lib Dem group. You'd never think, looking back, when I first became a councillor in 2007, that we'd be sitting here in a Lib Dem controlled council for the first time ever. And that's primarily down to Joe. So, Joe, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Paul. It's great to see you. It's been a long journey, isn't it?
It has been a long journey, yeah, and we've known each other for a long time. And I wanted to really start our conversation by going back to 2010, because it was in that amazing general election with Cleggmania that I first met you. Take us back to that. What was your first memory about the party and why did you even get involved?
Yeah, I mean, I'd sort of always had a passing interest in politics. You know, I wasn't a sort of political geek or political nerd, but always had a bit of an interest in current affairs. And yeah, I think the general election came right at the right time for me. I got hooked in by Cleggmania and just really the general buzz around the election. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
It is, and I mean, you've obviously gone on to fantastic things. I mean, I've always supported you through that, and we've worked together, haven't we, to build this up to what is now, a Lib Dem stronghold in terms of the council. You've just got elected as leader of the LGA group. An amazing feat, really, for someone of your age. You're still only 28. What do you see then as the big issues facing the LGA and local government?
We've had just the most turbulent and amazing few years, whether that's Brexit or the COVID pandemic, and those have brought fresh challenges, new challenges, but we're also dealing with the challenges we always have. So really we're coming to a point where it's a sort of perfect storm, whether that's on housing, whether that's on social care, whether that's on the ongoing funding crisis within local government, and of course we've got the climate emergency, which is the big issue of our day. And local government needs to play its part in shaping that. And the good thing is, Lib Dem councils up and down the country, and councillors, whether they're in administration or indeed whether they're in opposition, are being proactive in trying to affect change. We need to be robust. We need to be proactive in dealing with those challenges. And as I said, the good news is that Lib Dems up and down the country are making inroads. But the key thing is we need to get more Lib Dems elected to ensure that we can do more.
And I mean, in terms of the climate emergency, obviously it's the key thing. This summer we've seen these horrendous events all around the world, haven't we? And we're continuing to see that. Can you give us any examples of how Lib Dem councils around the country have been tackling the climate emergency?
Yeah, we've got some really fantastic examples up and down the country. So, in our own area, here in the Cotswolds, our own council, we've implemented a net carbon zero checklist. So that's so developers can look at that and know how to build in a sustainable way, which will help us to reach our net zero targets. Down in Bath, just down the road, you'll know this, a lot of coverage, the clean air zone. So, taking really quite a controversial and tough measure to try and improve air quality, but that's the sort of radical things that are needed. Or indeed over in Cambridgeshire, where our fantastic lead at the LGA, Pippa Halings, is really leading a charge over there on climate change. So there are some really good examples of where the Lib Dems are leading. We have to, though, councils up and down the country recognise that we can't do this alone. We can't do this through siloed working. So the whole local government community needs to come together. And I'm pleased to say that, in my own area, we're working cross-party with other Lib Dem councils, but also, with those of different political colours to really try and challenge the consensus on climate change, work together and come up with those strategies and indeed those actions to try and ensure that local government is playing its part. Lib Dems have a proud history when it comes to dealing with climate change, and indeed it's one of the reasons I joined the party. As a young person, I was very concerned about the climate. I joined because we've got strong green credentials, and particularly as we come into this new landscape where the Green Party are getting more and more active, well, actually, Lib Dems are the ones doing things. We're the ones who are in power in councils up and down the country, implementing green policies. So we've got a really good sell when it comes to the climate, and we need to make sure that we own it, because we are delivering.
Yeah, you're right, and we are, aren't we? And certainly at Gloucestershire County Council, I remember it was me who actually proposed the motion that we declared a climate emergency. It wasn't the Tories and it wasn't the Greens, it was us, wasn't it? So Joe, we were talking about how we met, 11 years ago now, but you've got a very interesting story really, because you came into politics at such a young age. You were 17 when I first met you, and I spotted your leadership potential then. I really did. But also in the back of my mind was I wondered whether you would stick with it, not because of anything specific to you, but because most young people then will find something else that they'll do. So, why did you stick with it?
I don't want to sound cliche, but I really do care about trying to make the area that I live in a better place. There have been highs and lows over the last 10 years, and there have been times when I've been very frustrated and thought, why do I bother? You remember 2015, it was so devastating. Yeah. It was such a bad night and such a bad result. But I tell you what, the feeling that I got, going into the leader's office at the district council, 2 years ago, was amazing, because for the first time ever in our part of the world, we were able to influence change. We were able to challenge the status quo on the big issues that face our area, the housing crisis, planning, all of these issues we were able to affect and influence now. And of course, it's frustrating being in power, I can tell you that, but we are on the way to tackling some of those issues, and the fact that we're here now in power as Liberal Democrats, I know will improve our area. So it's that. What keeps me motivated? It's the ability to affect change and drive change, and really try and make our corner of the world a better place. And hopefully, the knock-on effect of that is trying to make the country a better place.
Let's talk about the housing crisis. Now, as a young person, you're 28. You've achieved a lot in that short time, but you understand probably better than anyone what it's like being a young person trying to get on the housing ladder. So, what do you want from that?
I think the feeling I get is it's just grossly unfair. You see thousands and thousands of new houses being built. You see big developers making millions and millions of pounds, but actually you don't see it making a dent into the housing crisis. And I know a lot of people, tying it into the planning reforms, people get really, really hacked off when they see thousands of new homes going up, but local people not being able to afford them. I think what we need as a party, and what we're doing in councils up and down the country, is we need a policy that puts people before profit, where we can have quite a radical council house building programme once again. So we need to get the government to empower councils to do that. I think we've got examples across the country, whether that's in South Lakeland, Eastleigh, those are delivering council homes again. We look in other areas like Chelmsford, or in my own area, where we're putting exciting strategies in place that will deliver affordable housing. So as a party, I want us to be the party of housing, but ensuring that we're delivering the right sort of housing.
And with regard to the planning reform specifically, one of the issues, isn't it, is the enabling local people to retain control of the process, isn't it? Where do you see that, and what's the issue then in terms of the government's planning reform with regard to that?
Yeah, Paul, you know how frustrating it is as a local councillor when you put in a comment on a planning application and it feels like it gets ignored. Indeed, we've got parish councillors and residents who have exactly that problem. These proposals are a disgrace, because they will remove the right for local communities to have their say on planning applications, be that their neighbour's extension or indeed a big application for thousands of homes, and that has to be concerning. We're a party that believes in local government. We're a party that believes in localism, and I think, if you look at what we did in coalition when we introduced neighbourhood plans, that wouldn't have happened without the Lib Dems, and that's because we recognise the importance in local communities and having their say, not to stop development, but to be able to influence it and have a positive change. So I think the planning reforms are a total step back when it comes to communities being able to have their say, amongst many other issues, and Lib Dems should be fighting those, and we need to make sure that we are holding the government to account on these, because make no doubt about it, these will strip local people of their chance to have a say.
Absolutely. So there is a call to arms for all of us, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Now, you've talked a lot about local councils and what local councils do. On the agenda, on the horizon again, is reorganisation of local government. We hear that the Tories are pushing this again, or trying to influence certain ways of reorganising things. What's your view of that then?
I think it's crackers. You look at all of the issues we've got going on in the country at the minute, whether that's the fallout from Brexit, whether that's pandemic recovery. And we're saying to local authorities and local councils, well, actually, we think it's time to have a big change around. Just think of the instability that will cause. The good work streams that many councils are doing on COVID recovery, trying to support their local economy. I just think it's totally the wrong time to be having a debate about the structures of councils. Regardless of what you think of unitary authorities, whether you're for, whether you're against, I just really think now is not the time to be having that discussion. But what I would say is it does look like the government are going to come out with something in the autumn. We know there's going to be a lot of talk about so-called levelling up and devolution. I think what we await is the details of that, and it could be that the face of local government changes very radically. And as Liberal Democrats, we need to make sure that we have a robust response. And I think the key point is a united response to those announcements.
So this summer we had some, terrible stuff in the news about Afghanistan, just in the last few weeks, in fact, with the UK and the US having to exit rapidly that country with all the consequences of that. Just appalling, really, what we saw on our TV screens and what we've heard about. That's at national and international level, but in terms of local government, where do you see the role of local government with regard to Afghan refugees?
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul, and I think unfortunately it's a stain on both our reputation and that of the United States. I think we're clearly abdicating our responsibility to a country we've invested so much in. But you're quite right. When it comes to the local response, councils are stepping up. And the thing I'm really proud of is that the councils that are going above and beyond quite often are Liberal Democrat councils. So we can be very proud of that. I think what we need, though, and what we need from the government is the money, the resources and the logistics to help us do that. Some like to frame this as, oh, well, you're taking away a home from a local family. Well, no, actually, most councils are looking at engaging the private sector to try and come up with some housing. But I think the thing to say is it's not either or. We can do both. We're a wealthy enough country to provide housing for local people that need it. We can do that if we give local government the power to do that, but also meet our international obligations and our obligations to those who fought alongside our troops in Afghanistan.
You and I look at social media all the time. It can be awful, but it does give you a window into what's going on in people's minds. And I've seen the vitriol flying around saying we need to look after our own first, in inverted commas. So your rebuttal there would be then?
Well, the UK has a proud history of providing sanctuary for those in need. And I don't think that's any different. And you're always going to get the people, who are insular and don't want to help. But I think most British people, and I really do, I think most British people know we've got an obligation to the people of Afghanistan, those who fought alongside our troops and those who've had their lives turned upside down. It's not either or. I stress we can do both. If we enable councils to deliver housing for local people, then of course we can help others and our international obligations.
That's good. That's a very inspiring message. We know that politics is a very male-driven, male-dominated environment. Here we are, two men talking, in fact. But both of us have strived to involve more people and strive for diversity. What's your view on how you can make that happen?
The party's made massive strides in the last few years at, trying to improve diversity. And you only have to look at the number of women we now got in Parliament, which is great. And indeed in leadership positions. We've got 3 fantastic female leaders of county councils. That's a real achievement. But we've still got a very, very long way to go. And I think we need to recognise that for many people in our party, they do find it difficult to get their voice heard, and in particular, people from underrepresented groups. So I'm pleased that HQ are doing a review into diversity, and look forward to seeing the reviews of that, or the findings of that, I should say. I think it's really important that as an LGA group and working with our colleagues at ALDC and indeed HQ, we look at how we can apply that to local government, because we are far too male, we are far too pale, and to finish the cliche, we are far too stale. So we've got a long way to go, but it requires people to take it seriously, and I think we are as a party, but we've still got a long way to go. So watch this space.
Now let's move to the future for the Lib Dems, because obviously it's been a tough few years since the coalition, although we've had local successes like here in the Cotswolds and in places in the north, for instance, it's still been tough at times. So what does the future hold? Where do you see the party going then in the next few years?
We've got a real opportunity, and I think we can be optimistic. We have to be as Lib Dems, but I think we can be. Paul, you and I are sick of people saying to us, there's a real opportunity for the Lib Dems, you need to seize it. Well, now is the time we have to seize it. You look at the north of the country, we talk about the red wall. We also look at the south of the country, we've got the blue wall. Well, rather than talking about it, let's start taking them apart. You don't have to look at some of the Labour councils in the north that just take their residents for granted, We know that where we challenge, where we've got good local alternatives, people will vote for us. And of course, it's been difficult in the last decade or so because we have had that hangover from coalition, which we know in the north particular has been very difficult for us. But we can see the signs are starting to shift there, so that's good news. In the south, we know we've got a tremendous opportunity with the blue wall. We know that with good differentiation from the Conservatives, with really telling people, actually, we're here and we exist, we can make inroads. Here in the Cotswolds is a really good example of that. So yeah, 2022 and 2023 as well, we have to make ground and we have to hold what we've got. That is absolutely crucial. So my message to everybody, in the party is it's all hands on deck, I'm afraid. I'm saying that to my local councillors and to my members, it's all hands on deck. We've got an opportunity here, we can seize it, but only with good local results. Future parliamentary success will come from solid local government election results, and we've got the opportunity to do that, so let's seize it.
Brilliant. So it's about seize the day, isn't it, really, for you, Joe? It's been great to talk to you and to listen to your inspiring words, and I hope we all can go away, work hard and achieve some brilliant things for the party. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Good evening, conference. Welcome back to item F20, the debate on excuse me, building communities. Now, you'll find the motion on pages 55 to 57 of your agenda, and we have accepted one amendment for debate, which is on page 58A and 58B. We've had quite a lot of requests for separate votes on bits of the amendment, so we think the most sensible way to handle this is to break the amendment into two halves. So they'll be moved together, but we will vote on them separately as though there were two amendments. And the first part of that is lines 1 to 20 of the amendment, and then we'll vote separately on lines 21 to 29 of the amendment. Now, we've had a lot of cards in to speak in this debate, unsurprisingly, so I apologise in advance to those we can't call. We also have quite a few standing by, and I apologise for we may not be able to call all of you. But we have had a bit of a mix-up in communications, so I would like to ask Stephen Robinson and Jonathan Brown and Fraser Graham. So that's Stephen Robinson, Jonathan Brown and Fraser Graham. Please check your emails because we want to call you in the debate, but we've only just been able to get in touch with you, and I'm sorry for that. But I would like to ask all speakers to stick very closely to the time, or preferably underrun, and then we'll be able to get as many of you as possible into the debate. Okay, can I ask Sarah Olney from Twickenham and Richmond to stand by to move the amendment? And I now call to move the motion Tom Morrison from Cheadle. Tom.
Good evening, conference. It's a huge honour to move this motion this evening as it touches upon a subject very close to my heart. It's clear that not only do we live in a housing crisis, but we also live in a housing affordability crisis. Across the UK, people are being priced out of owning their own home, priced out of renting good, solid housing, and being priced out of living in a stable, community-centric environment. Now, I was just 13 years old when I realised the positive power that political action could have on someone's life. My mother, who was working 2 jobs to make ends meet, was forced into homelessness after her private landlord hiked up rent so far she couldn't afford to put a roof over the heads of me, my brother, and herself. And just when things looked hopeless, it was a Liberal Democrat councillor called David Bruce that stepped up and fought to get my family a council house, giving us all something we had never experienced before, a permanent, stable home. Now, conference, I must say, let's talk about the amendment here. The amendment has some really good things in it. For once, I agree that we should have we should be looking at putting a percentile target on social housing. But what I don't agree with is the stripping away the targets whatsoever for housing nationally. Now, I'll talk you a little bit more about what I saw when I was younger, when I was given that house. See, that home changed my life. It gave me and my brother the right environment to succeed in school and build friendships with children around the street. It meant my mum never had to worry about where we would be sleeping in the next 6 months, and instead allowed her to focus on building her career and providing for her 2 boys. Now, I hate the term house building. It's a cold phrase that significantly weighs the value on buildings as a commodity rather than an integral and vital part of growing and developing communities. And this motion before you puts community development using homes, not houses, as a foundational building block to succeed. Conference, too often politicians of all colours will tell us that we need a radical housing policy to ensure that everyone has a roof over their head. And still, in 2021, we are no nearer to this vision being a reality. Housing targets get watered down or simply not met. Neighbourhoods and local plans get used as a way to stop development rather than encourage the right development. And developers and planning officers clash on avoidable details when they instead should be collaborating to provide homes for the people they should be serving. The Conservatives' dreadful planning reforms thankfully now kick into touch, which would have simply decimated any last bit of trust with the public when it came to creating more homes. They claimed that the plans were radical, but the only thing they would have achieved would have been stopping people from getting involved in the decisions to shape their own communities. Labour, on the other hand, are lost. They're claiming to be fighting for more affordable and social housing, but Labour-run councils like Manchester are now criticised every day for the lack of properly affordable homes being developed within their authority boundaries. Conference is a huge gap in the market for a party that is going to take home building seriously. There is a space for a party that will offer a truly radical policy on building communities. Now, this motion does that. A proper and achievable target for developing homes across the UK. Tick. A truly target-based plan for developing social housing. Tick. Prioritising tackling the climate emergency. Tick. And a good wink to our liberal traditions through implementing a land value tax. A check and a tick with socks and sandals. Now, let's go back to that amendment. Now, anyone will tell you I am a Sarah Olney fan. She led a fantastic campaign in Richmond. She's got great political instincts. But on this, I'm afraid she's missed the point. Whilst there is a lot to commend with the suggestions put forward, a percentile target, as I said, for social housing is a brilliant idea. The removal of any housing target whatsoever is simply not going to work. Now, I agree we should be strengthening local control over housing and providing regional strategies. But let's not get ourselves in a situation where we are dependent on those brave local authorities who may consider setting up housing targets, whilst other authorities game the system and look to dodge their responsibilities. The housing crisis is a national emergency and it needs a national solution to ensure we can solve it. So for that reason, I would ask that people vote against the amendment and instead for the motion as it is. Now, Conference, at the beginning of the motion, I told you about how social housing literally changed the course of my life for the better. Our country needs more homes. Our residents need housing they can afford, and our communities need to be developed in a sustainable and affordable way. So let's meet this challenge head on by becoming the first party to offer a truly radical home building policy. Conference, please support the motion.
Thanks very much indeed, Tom. Would Andrew George from St Ives please stand by? And I now call to move Amendment 1, Sarah Olney, MP for Richmond Park. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Duncan, and thank you to Tom for those very kind words. But I must say, I'm actually here this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of Tim Farron, who's would normally have been moving this amendment. But the reason that Tim isn't here is because he's got an urgent family event that he needs to attend to. And even Tim, king of the conference floor, Farron, puts his family first. And we all do. We all of us put our families first. And that is why this motion and this amendment are so important, because I'm not just talking on behalf of Tim here. I'm also talking on behalf of all of my parliamentary colleagues. All of us see week in, week out, the effects of that housing shortage that Tom so eloquently described there. And we know the effect it has on our constituents. We see the effect that it has on their families. We see those children who cannot get a decent education, who cannot feel secure in their own homes. And we are moving this amendment because we really want to solve that. So the issue at point is the top-down the top-down target of numbers of homes. And what we really, really believe is that, yes, we need to see hundreds of thousands of homes built every year, but the top-down target favours developers. And as long as developers get to just fill every space they can possibly fill with homes, because there's a top-down target to meet, and that target is more important than anything else, then we cannot get the homes that we need. We can't build our way to affordability. The government's own data shows that building 300,000 new homes for 20 years would only reduce house prices by 6%. Now, what we believe is that the top-down targets have done nothing to help young people get on the housing ladder. They create a disconnect between central government and local government. Instead, local developments must be made by working with local communities rather than against them. It's local communities that know what housing they need and where. It's local communities that know what infrastructure they need. And this amendment is trying to empower those local communities. Developers like top-down targets. It hands them power to pack as many homes as they can without any care about local infrastructure. Liberal Democrats want to enhance the powers of local authorities, and this motion goes some way to doing that, and the amendment helps. The amendment and motion as a whole is about taking powers away from housing developers and handing them to local authorities instead. Millions of homes every year are granting planning permission but never built. This motion gives local authorities greater powers to design developments, end land banking, and take the lead in building them. But our amendment strengthens that. It enhances compulsory purchase powers and allows local authorities to penalise developers who don't build. Top-down targets take those powers away and hand them to housing developers. And social housing is absolutely key to this. Our amendment calls for a new target of 40% of all new homes to be social homes. Rather than again setting a top-down target, this target applies no matter how many homes are built and should apply to all developments. Developers are the first to remove any conditions set on developments, reducing the number of affordable homes. But social housing gives much needed competition to private developers and landlords. The lack of social homes is part of the reason why rents are so high. Our amendment gives local authorities the right to end right to buy and finally start to reduce the damage that was done. Top-down targets on total homes will do nothing to enhance the number of social homes we need. I just repeat what I said. All of the parliamentarians support this amendment, and I'm standing in for Tim because I represent all of us. Thank you very much, conference.
Thank you, Sarah. Would Sean McLeod from Lewis please stand by? And they're now called to speak Andrew George from St Ives. Andrew.
Thank you, Duncan. So I discourage the party from not only enshrining but reinforcing a failed and counterproductive policy of setting targets for house builders. We must challenge lazy conventional thinking, not simply to repeat it. After all, house building is a means to an end, not an end in itself. The end is meeting unmet housing need. I therefore repeat my oft-repeated proposal that we should concentrate our planning and housing policy on the priority of meeting need, not just of building homes. So yes, set targets, but set targets to meet need, not to fill developers' boots. Cornwall is a microcosm of this failure. We're not NIMBYs, probably one of the fastest growing places in the United Kingdom. The housing stock has almost trebled since the 1960s. Yet the housing problems of locals have got worse. We've seen a massive and growing increase in housing injustice, second home ownership, Cornish homes treated as property investment vehicles, and a shrinking, extortionate and far less secure private rented sector. While secure, affordable rented sector has shrunk, second homes have ballooned, aided by massive industrial scale tax loopholes. While the poor are penalised with the bedroom tax, the Tories have rewarded the wealthy with massive tax giveaways. Just last year, over £100 million of Cornwall's COVID aid was handed out to second homeowners. We should reinforce our long-standing policies to control this injustice. Since the Kate Barker Commission in 2004 reinforced the possession and faith of supply-side solutions, target-based housing policy has consistently failed. It also tips far too much power into the hands of land value speculators and those who fill their boots in a planning system which is fueled by greed rather than need. My experience as a chief executive of a charitable housing trust, which is there to meet local housing need across Cornwall and in other places, I deal with the failures of the system on a daily basis and suffer its repeated consequences. The setting of high housing targets creates unhelpful hope value. Though it sounds counterintuitive, the best way of meeting need in many places like mine is to start with strong, not weak planning controls, then to provide a range of planning tools like the rural exceptions policy to prioritise projects which provide for secure, decent, in perpetuity, affordable homes which are protected to meet a defined need. Though it doesn't go far enough, I support the amendment. Please delete line 38. It's very unhelpful. Housing policy focused on meeting unmet need rather than house building targets would require a set of tools which of course allow new development, but also address housing injustice, control second homes, make better use of the housing stock. So yes, let's work to meet local meet need, not simply to fill developers' boots. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Would Oliver Jones-Lyon from Gateshead please stand by? I now call Sean McLeod from Lewis. Sean.
That conference, and thank you I'm asking conference to vote against the motion and support the ALDC amendment in full. I mean, people will think I live in Lewis and it's a rich little area. Much of my area it isn't actually. It's quite deprived and run down. So we do need investment. But while we need to build houses, they don't need to be set by arbitrary targets for government figures. As a local district councillor, I see every day how much of an affordable housing crisis we face. I also am not a honer, and I won't be probably until my parents pass. But every day I am faced with builders' greed. And while we need to build new houses, we need to do so in a manner that is affordable and not top-down targets that simply do not work. We need to build housing that puts people first, before profits, and delivers on housing need, especially social housing for rent, which local communities are screaming out for. We need better affordable housing that developers can't wriggle out of easily from, as they currently do, due to measures not being fit for purpose. And 9 out of 10 planning applications are approved. We have over 1 million houses with approved planning permission for over the past decade that still not have a brick being laid. There are over 1 million homes in agreed sites in the local plan that have still not yet been brought forward yet by developers. That's 2 million houses sitting out there. If local authorities need more 2 or 3 bedroom houses, but approve lots of 1 bedroom flats, for example, they will meet their housing quota set by government, but they won't address the housing needs that many of our local communities face. We need the local authorities to have more powers so that they can hold their developers to account and deliver the housing we need, not what a developer wants to deliver. We need conference to back ALD's amendment in full. We need to remove national housing targets, not increase them. In my area, we have just taken the lead from the Conservatives in the race for a new MP. And we have focused on the Tories' housing numbers imposed on our local area. And it's been a massive part of it. If we then vote to increase them higher than the government suggests, then not only will ours, but many areas like ours will remain Tory seats for years to come, but we will struggle to win seats going forward on local councils. We already have a build mentality, and even at the moment, it's not sustainable in many areas. We are losing our green spaces as many brownfield sites are now developed, and our road network is simply at breaking point. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much, Sean. Would Prue Bray from Wokingham please stand by? And then I'll call Oliver Jones-Lyons from Gateshead. Oliver.
Conference, I want to invite you to think through lines 5 through 12 of the amendment with me today. The Liberal Democrats are not an YIMBY party, whether it's our leader, who has emphatically declared himself to be a YIMBY, or numerous brilliant Lib Dem councils from Watford to Eastleigh that strive to meet their housing needs by bringing communities with them. That's why I wasn't worried about our opposition to planning reforms, because I had total faith that we would see a motion that presented our positive Liberal alternative to the disastrous planning reforms. This motion starts that, and I expect that work will be continued by the FPC Housing Working Group, but that's why I was quite confused by this amendment. ALDC has submitted an amendment without any consultation of their members, an amendment which has in fact caused resignations from amongst their ranks, to a motion which was drafted in consultation with a working group which had stakeholders from across the party, young Liberals, councillors, and even a convener of the Green Lib Dem Sustainable Housing Group. It then seems that the parliamentary party, led by a self-avowed YIMBY, I would note, has piled in behind this amendment, including an article from our former leader, Tim Farron. Conference, a BBC article previewing our party conference, noted our need to, quote, woo young professionals. If we want to realise our hopes of crumbling the blue wall, sorry, I went a bit tone off there. Tim Farron, in the opening of his article, remarks about how no one has ever decided their vote on the basis of a leaflet with a housing target printed on it. And that may well be true, but conference, I invite you to visualise the scenes across TV screens in 2023. Davy Mania sweeping the country, the Liberal Democrat vote share rising day on day as young professionals decide to vote for us, and we finally get onto those all-important TV debate stages again. Our leader has asked a very simple question: how many houses do you want to build to end the housing crisis? He simply cannot answer it. Cue Tory and Labour attack ads about how we cannot be trusted on housing. Those young professionals who are planning to vote by their thousands, swinging marginal seats like South Cambridgeshire Cheadle, all of a sudden realise that we will not, in fact cannot, commit to building the homes that will allow them to rent affordably, or God forbid, maybe even own their own home. We once again fumble the ball at election time. Housing targets are obviously not the sole solution to the housing crisis, but the past failures of targets aren't due to them being bad policy. It's because targets from successive Labour and Conservative governments aren't backed up by the solid policy and brilliant local councils bring communities with us that this motion and our party offer. This is the beginning of a credible plan to not only target the required 380,000 homes a year, but to deliver them. But we must today commit to delivering those homes if we want any hope of winning young professionals. Tim Farron argued this amendment was not NIMBY. If it isn't NIMBY, then what is it? The only answer is a grave strategic error. I urge you to vote to delete lines 1 to 20 of the amendment.
Thank you very much indeed, Oliver. Could I ask Fraser Graham from South Edinburgh to stand by, and now call Prue Bray from Wokingham. Prue.
Thank you. Good evening, conference. I'm mostly in favour of this motion, but I'm very strongly in favour of Amendment 1. Now, I have 3 adult children who have no hope of getting on the housing ladder at the moment. And as a counsellor, I get loads of casework from people who are stuck in overcrowded or poorly maintained accommodation. And I also see the impact of homelessness and the strain that living in temporary accommodation puts on families. And I totally get that the intention of the motion is to find a way to give everyone a decent roof over their heads at a cost they can afford. And I get the passion that's behind it, as we've just heard from the previous speaker. That's also what I want. But trying to fix the shortage of housing by promising to build lots more is far too simplistic, and it doesn't work. Successive governments have set high housing targets, and successive governments have failed to get anywhere near them. The current government have set their own target, and according to Shelter, they were already going to miss it by 8 years before the pandemic struck, and you can't exactly accuse them of not being keen on house building. Setting a national target figure does not magically produce houses, and it certainly doesn't magically produce houses of the right type in the right places to meet the housing need. And I support the amendment because it understands that the answer is more complex than setting a numerical target. Developers build houses to suit themselves and their profit margins. Getting a decent percentage of affordable housing on any site is tough, with the government seemingly determined to make it even more difficult. And tinkering with the planning system to make it easier to build, as the Tories have been doing, is a red herring. Any councillor can prove that to you. Unless the whole system changes, no matter how many houses get built, we will still have the same problems that we have now. Too many to name them all, but they include treating a house as a commodity for making money out of, instead of as a home to live in. Unless the whole system changes, greedy, grasping landlords will still have the upper hand. Poor quality buildings will do nothing to minimise carbon emissions, and there will be more Grenfell Towers and more cladding scandals. The only way to fix this problem is to change the entire system. Sort out council housing, sort out the flaws that tip everything in favour of developers. In fact, do a lot of the things that are in the motion. But do not rely on housing targets, because they cannot solve anything. Vote for Amendment 1 and then vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prue. Would Kath Pinnock from Batley and Spen please stand by? I now call Fraser Graham from Edinburgh South. Fraser.
Hi, conference. I sit before you as someone who has seen the other side of this housing issue, being an architect and working with developers who build housing. I feel like the whole argument of relying on developers to build affordable homes is entirely flawed, because developers will only do what makes profit for them. At the moment, the cost of building anything is massively increased. The cost of materials is sky high. The availability of materials is lower than ever before, partly due to Brexit, partly due to COVID, partly due to other projects taking up a lot of available materials. And this led to developers who are already committed by planning to including affordable homes as part of their developments, now applying to planning and saying, actually, we can't do that. We'll make you a payment to the council instead, because we wouldn't make profit on that affordable housing. We need to stop relying on developers entirely to build affordable housing. And instead, we need to be doing what some councils are already doing, of building it ourselves. Sutton has just won the RIBA London Award for some of their excellent local council housing they've just built. In Nottingham, there is a council housing scheme that actually won the RIBA Sterling Prize. That's the highest available award for an architectural project. I support this motion broadly. I especially support the part that mentions ensuring that the infrastructure is in place before we start building the housing. I think that's crucial, because a lot of the biggest arguments that's always made against any sort of housing project is, oh, well, we don't have the infrastructure. Well, let's get ahead of it. Let's actually put up the infrastructure and make affordable communities. It's not about just sticking one house here, one house there. It's about building communities in their entirety. I don't support the amendment because I think we do need a target. I think we do need a clear figure that says, hey, we are going to build housing. Here's what we want to build. The argument that, oh, in previous times, these targets have been missed. Well, if you don't have ambition, what will you achieve? If you don't shoot from the moon, you have no hope of landing amongst the stars. So please vote down the amendment, vote for this motion, but also just all of Lib Dem councillors think, why are we just relying on developers? Why not actually take the council, look at investment and build the social housing yourselves? Because you can build good quality, affordable communities in your communities with the support of your local communities without relying on developers who are only going to do such disgusting things as pour doors, as building substandard housing because they know that block's going to be affordable. Let's stop that. Let's actually start building it ourselves, proper social council housing that's fit for purpose and fit for the people who are going to live in it. Thank you very much, conference.
Thank you very much, Fraser. Would Tom Campion from Newcastle upon Tyne please stand by? And I now call Kath Pinnock from Batley and Spen. Kath is the party's spokesperson on communities and local government in the House of Lords. Kath.
Good evening, conference. And I'm a councillor as well, and I've been a councillor for over 30 years in West Yorkshire. So I do know a fair bit about housing issues. Obviously, I support the principles expressed in the motion, and I thank those who have spent time and thought in bringing it to conference. I am not convinced, though, that the solutions proposed will help end the crisis. I know as a councillor that residents will object to housing plans that are done to them. However, a process of local discussion about housing need and solutions can and does result in support, especially if the benefits to the existing community are clear. Lib Dem run councils successfully do this all the time. The evidence is that a top-down, we know best target for house building, both Conservative and Labour do, sounds good on paper, but absolutely fails to deliver on the ground. Targets help speculative developers and edge out social housing providers. On the other hand, evidence from neighbourhood plans demonstrates that you get more houses than those set in a top-down target. In my experience, people hate having decisions forced on them, even when for a positive outcome. And that is why I cannot support the compulsory purchase proposal in the motion. There is much that is fundamentally wrong about the current approach to house building. Power lies with developers and landowners. The result is sites that are not appropriate. Developers build for maximum profit rather than meeting need. 4-bed exec homes rather than homes for first-time buyers, because that's where the money is. It also results in the Grenfell tragedy and the cladding scandal that followed. As the motion indicates, we desperately need to build more homes for social rent, but that requires fundamental change, not just a wishful target. There is a need for different types of housing, such as extra care. And what about the very large growth in second homes for holiday lets, Airbnb, which in some villages comprise 90% of housing and means local people not able to find anywhere to live? Solve the housing crisis will mean different solutions for different places. It will mean getting the consent of local people. That way will provide a very Liberal Democrat solution. Please support Amendment 1 and support further consideration of meeting housing need.
Thank you very much, Kath. Would Janie Little from North Somerset please stand by? And I now call Tom Campion from Newcastle upon Tyne. I think I'm right in saying that Tom is the party's newest councillor, having been elected in the by-election just a few weeks ago. Tom.
That is correct. Thank you. Conference, I'm so disappointed that this amendment has been put into what would have otherwise been a really fantastic policy. Not only that, but I'm disappointed that some of the most vocal voices in support of this amendment are those from local government, who are not only supposed to stand up for the voices of those in their community, but to also act for the betterment of their areas. It's so sad that many in local government seem to perceive the notion of building houses as something that's detrimental to their communities, choosing to focus on the potential negatives of new housing and new residents rather than embracing the positives. My ward in Newcastle contains 3 small villages, some residential courts from the 60s and 70s, and the majority of Newcastle's Great Park, the North East's largest new housing estate. The Great Park began construction in 2001 and has so far provided over 2,500 houses, with plans to increase this to 3,300 by the end of the decade and a further 800 in the future. It's by no means perfect. We still don't have a supermarket. We're still waiting on the final construction of the secondary school, and the roads remain unadopted. However, the Great Park hasn't just provided 2,500 houses. It's provided 2,500 homes. It's provided opportunities for young people like myself to get on the housing ladder. It's provided thousands of jobs due to new office spaces. It's allowed young families to live city centre, freeing up city centre housing for young people, and move to somewhere that's surrounded by green spaces and active travel initiatives. When I speak to residents on the Great Park about their issues, they know the area isn't perfect, but for many, they just appreciate having a house to call a home, somewhere to settle, and somewhere to escape the negative spiral of rental properties. Conference, we are in a housing crisis. That is a fact. We're pricing young people, potentially your children or grandchildren, out of being able to buy a house that they can call home. We're forcing young people to leave where they grew up to even want to think about buying a home. We are fundamentally letting young people down. But there is a solution. Build more houses and build them now. We're in the middle of a climate crisis, and we've rightly set measurable and deliverable targets to reduce the impact on our climate. Why then are we looking to do the complete opposite for the housing crisis? By scrapping a national house building target, we're simply trying to brush the problem away and hope my generation will eventually be able to solve it. Trust me, new housing can bring so many positives to your area. It brings new people, opens up opportunities to increase the quality of life, and creates potential opportunities to improve the lives of many. Conference, don't try and brush this crisis under the carpet. Vote against this amendment and vote for the motion unamended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Would Joe Harris from the Cotswolds please stand by? And I now call Janie Little from North Somerset.
Thank you. I genuinely cannot believe that I'm at a Lib Dem conference having to make a speech on why we should keep national house building targets in the middle of a housing crisis. Yes, we are the party of localism and we should continue to be proud of that. But housing policy requires marrying community power with measurable national targets and efforts because this is a national crisis. To tackle the housing crisis, we need an ambitious vision and targets. This amendment denies the motion of both. The Tory government are not only failing young people on housing, but also in their inaction on the climate emergency, their failure to tackle student finance, and the recent rise in national insurance, which particularly affects young people. Our vision must be one where young people are given a fair chance. We have great vision in our party alongside targets to get us there. Our vision for a greener society and our targets to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030 guide our local environmental work. Our vision for a society where women have their voices heard and our target for gender balance in all types of leadership roles encourages us to stand up against casual sexism. Our vision for a liberal future and our target of getting a Liberal Democrat majority on our local council or in government motivates us to deliver leaflets and knock on doors at election time. But if we pass this amendment, we will not have that vision or those compelling targets on housing. This amendment cannot be masked behind the facade of nuance. This not only refuses to rise to the ambition required to tackle the housing crisis, but it actively facilitates NIMBYism. This amendment does not hold us to account on taking radical action to address the challenges we face. As Oliver said, are we really envisioning a Davy and a hustings saying the Lib Dems are so committed to tackling the housing crisis that we don't even have a house building target? Really? And do we think that the mere existence of a national housing target will deter people from voting Liberal Democrat? Conference, if we pass this, it says that the Lib Dems are not invested in young people. The Lib Dems are not willing to do everything in our power to tackle the housing crisis. The Lib Dems are not willing to include young people in that powerful vision for a liberal society that we all hold dearly. The Lib Dems, simply put, are not a party for young people. I'm sure there are people who will see this as the young Liberals back at it again, causing problems, but we're going to cause problems when we just want somewhere affordable to live, an absolute basic. Many people in the party have spoken passionately about wanting the young Liberals to be radical, to hold the party to account, to make sure that we as Lib Dems are saying the right thing on young people issues. And this is what we're doing right now, holding you to account. Conference, I urge you to vote against this amendment and to vote for the motion unamended. Choosing to keep national targets says that young people matter in our party and in our country. So please vote for the motion unamended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janie. Would Jonathan Brown from Chichester please stand by? And I now call Joe Harris from Cotswolds. Joe.
Thank you. Alongside climate change, the housing crisis, or housing emergency, as we call it in the Cotswolds, is the issue of our day. It's one of the issues that under my leadership we're putting at the top of the agenda at the Local Government Association. I want to thank colleagues for bringing this excellent motion, in particular to Young Liberals. I look forward to working with you, whatever the result on the housing agenda. It's got us talking, and it's demonstrated the passion within our party for improving access to housing and our commitment to tackling the housing emergency. When it comes to accessing housing, I've learnt the hard way. As a young person paying sky-high rents, with home ownership a distant dream, at times it's been nearly impossible to make ends meet thanks to high housing costs in my neck of the woods. When it comes to delivering housing, I've learned as a council leader the hard way. In a district where house prices are some of the most expensive outside of London, that housing targets really aren't worth the paper they're written on quite often. And that's why I'd urge you to support both amendments. We need to focus on the type of housing we're delivering and empowering councils to deliver them. This needs to sit hand in hand with reform to the planning system, within which evidence-based housing need would be determined. I want us to be the party that gets councils building green social rented homes in their hundreds of thousands and takes the initiatives away from developers, putting people before profit when it comes to housing. We've had housing targets for years. While it may seem counterintuitive, all they've served to do is create a developer's charter and not tackle the root causes of the issue. Coupled with poor building standards, we have a system that allows developers to turn a huge profit, deliver hardly any social rented homes, and it results in people living in squalor. We have people living in squalor in this country, thanks to the government's lax approach to housing and building standards, and indeed their attitudes to their big friends and the big development companies, which fund, of course, the Conservative Party. This should be a central plank of our focus. I want us to be the party that has a clear plan to improve building standards, minimum sizes, and allowing councils to enforce them. Let's also focus on giving councils the power to bring empty properties back into use. In mine and in many other areas, that would slash the housing waiting lists in half. We also need a clear policy on brownfield sites, helping councils and developers to decontaminate them. We need to focus on what will really make a difference, not unachievable housing targets that may be a good headline, absolutely, but don't tackle the real issue and could well cause us political pain in areas where we should be on the march. We need to demonstrate to voters that the Lib Dems are the party that will turn the tide on the housing crisis, just like our councils are doing in Eastleigh, South Lakeland, Cheltenham and Chelmsford, that we have a real plan to ensure far more social rented homes are built in the UK and not just talking about it. I want us to be the party of housing, but we have to offer much more than our opponents. We need a clear plan of how we'll do this. Please support this amendment and then the substantive motion, and this will allow us to do this. Lib Dems, let's lead on housing. Let's tackle the housing emergency. Please support the amendments.
Thank you very much, Joe. Would Dorothy Thornhill from Watford please stand by? And I now call Jonathan Brown from Chichester.
Thank you. So I'd like to start with the principles that I think probably unite all of us in this debate. Everyone should have a decent home.
You need to bugger off again.
Yeah, I will. Everyone should have a decent home. We should protect the countryside. We think that it's possible to do both of those things. We care about strong communities, and that is reflected in our belief in representative local government with real power and authority to improve people's lives. So it's ironic that the amendment seeks to dramatically diminish the power the motion proposes to give to local authorities. I'm a councillor in a district in the Blue Wall, in the southeast of England. We have a huge housing target which we cannot meet due to a lack of infrastructure. That's not just me saying that, by the way. Highways England agree that the A27 cannot cope with the amount of new housing we are required to deliver without massive upgrades which we cannot afford and which cannot be funded from developer contributions. We have a large community campaign against overdevelopment. 3/4 of the district is inside a national park, and much of the rest is an area of outstanding natural beauty. So you really would expect me to be supportive of the amendment and the removal of a national target. But I'm also a 40-year-old who was only able to move out of my parents' house 4 weeks ago, thanks to the cost of housing locally. We have to get real. We need to say how we will deliver what we say we believe, that we can both protect the environment and that everyone ought to have a home. I'm a Liberal Democrat. I believe that local government can and should be empowered to deliver new housing. But we shouldn't kid ourselves that councils will deliver housing without prompting by government. By all means, ditch mutant algorithms for better methods which take into account local circumstances. By all means, come up with regional strategies to focus development in new towns to reduce pressure on other settlements. By all means, economically regenerate left behind parts of the country to make staying there more attractive rather than moving to areas where there is pressure on housing. We can and should do all of that, but if we're serious about offering young people hope that they'll ever have a decent home, whether bought or rented, we need to say how we'll deliver the new housing. As it happens, the motion proposes a very Liberal Democrat way of doing this. We'll adopt and adapt the German system of allowing local government to plan new development. The motion puts communities in control. It gives local government the power to acquire land without being held to ransom or ripped off. It allows local government to choose to safeguard land we value for biodiversity and to prioritise developing land that makes most sense. It enables local government to provide the infrastructure up front. I oppose the amendment because we need to reform the Land Compensation Act to enable local authorities, on behalf of their residents, to properly plan all development, not just the land that is being banked. Sarah Olney says a top-down target will empower developers, but her amendment strips away one of the key elements of the motion that gives local authorities the power to choose where to build. Let me repeat the key line: to give local authorities the power to acquire land at its current use value in order to be used to meet the community's need for housing. There are some who criticise councillors and campaigners.
Please draw your remarks to a close.
Okay. All right, so I think I'll finish just by saying we have a duty to make sure that local authorities genuinely ensure new housing will be affordable to local people.
Sorry, Jonathan, I have to close there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Sorry about that. Would Stephen Robinson from Chelmsford and Malden please stand by? And I now call Dorothy Thornhill, Baroness Thornhill from Watford, the party's spokesperson on housing in the House of Lords. Dorothy.
Thank you. Conference, I have the dubious honour, having been the elected mayor of Watford for 16 years, as being dubbed by the Tories as the pro-development mayor. And to be blunt, I still have the scars on my back for trying to do the right things in a Liberal way. But that said, I wish to support the amendment proposed by our new MP, Sarah Olney, and the bulk of this radical motion, with the exception of lines 38 to 40. I was delighted to see a housing motion brought forward. We are well overdue to look again at our policies, and I share the frustration of our members who are keen to get Liberal answers to today's housing crisis. So my heart is firmly with the movers and supporters of this motion, but my head was, by the end of reading it, firmly in my hands. It's the numbers conference. We have to get rid of the numbers for two very good reasons. Firstly, and in many ways, the most important, by trying to outbid the pro-developer Tories, we are buying into the myth that we can build ourselves into a position where the numbers reduce house prices and housing becomes more affordable. The position is, as significant evidence shows, very doubtful. And if achievable, it would take many decades and significant policy changes. Therefore, throwing big numbers about is actually meaningless. And I regret to say, it won't get a single young person on the housing ladder. National targets don't build houses. And secondly, in the language of Yes Minister, it would be a courageous decision, which was Sir Humphrey's code for electoral suicide. It will make it much more difficult for those of us out there, week after week, campaigning to get colleagues elected in May. We need to get real. We are fighting for our survival in many places. And in many of those places, we are rightly campaigning against unpopular, inappropriate development. It's what we do. And in several places that we control, including Watford, We are, in the face of considerable public hostility towards any development, campaigning against nationally imposed top-down Tory targets because, and this is important, this is not how we would do it. We're already called hypocrites by our opponents for our so-called populist stance on development. But I don't believe that, colleagues. I genuinely believe that we fight for our communities and the right to have their voice heard. We fight for the right homes in the right places, however difficult that might be under the current system. And we fight against the money and influence it buys of the monopolistic house builders who undermine both of those principles. The reality is, and you only need to go to a council development control meeting, we live in a world where this top-down target pressure has driven NIMBYs into bananas.
Please draw your remarks to a close.
Anywhere near anyone, and we want to increase that pressure. We have the Tories to fight, conference. Why agree a housing target that will appear on many Tory leaflets and probably none of our own? Support the whole amendment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dorothy. Would Pippa Halings from South Cambridgeshire please stand by? And I now call Stephen Robinson from Chelmsford and Malden.
Thank you, conference. Good evening. I have the privilege of being one of just a tiny handful of people in the country that can actually build homes and sustainable communities. I'm leader of Chelmsford Council that is ambitious for house building of all types. Recently, we've given permission for the first all-social rent site in 10 years, and we'll use the council's own property to do much more of this, not sell it off like the Tories. But sadly, most councils, including some Lib Dem ones, are not run by pro-housing groups. My next door council is run by a residents' association who run for election on a complete NIMBY agenda, a banana agenda, as Dorothy was just saying. So I agree with her on that. So if you don't have a target, a national target, then the banana council that I'm next door to is even less likely to build houses. So I'm against lines 8 to 12 of the amendment that remove a national target. Now, I completely agree with what colleagues have just said, that a target doesn't actually build houses. But we should have one because it sends a message that we are serious about house building. The number itself is actually less important. If someone isn't voting for me because we have a housing target of 1,000 a year, making it 900 or 1,100 isn't going to change their mind. But if we abandon a target for house building, it sends the wrong message, especially to young people who are the closest thing we have to a core vote. But remember, conference, we need to get people to vote for us first before we get to implement our policy. So the message that we send to our potential voters really matters. Now, the rest of the amendment does do some good things. For example, apprenticeships in house building are indeed absolutely essential. In Essex alone, we need 30,000 people to go into the construction industry just to build the houses that are in current local plans. And the rest of the motion, of course, has an awful lot of fantastic things that will actually deliver houses. But you must vote to keep a national target. And then you need to go out and elect more Liberal Democrat councils like mine that actually want to build genuinely sustainable communities. So please do keep a national target for house building numbers and then support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We're now moving to the summation speeches. I'm sorry for those 3 speakers we had hanging on. We're just not going to have time to call you. And I'm sorry, conference, we are going to overrun the finish time of 8 o'clock by at least 10 minutes. I hope you'll feel that the quality of this debate has justified that decision and enable us to call a few more speakers. So would Laura Gordon from Sheffield stand by to summate on the main motion? And I now call to summate on the amendment, Pippa Halings from South Cambridgeshire.
Conference, those who support Amendment 1 are strongly in support of the intention of this motion. We all agree there's a housing crisis that's failing young people and failing those who depend on social housing. And yes, as Lib Dems, we want radical change. We want to stop tinkering with a failed market system. And we want to take power away from the developers and give it to local authorities in a mass state building of green social homes, as we've heard. I'm proud to be part of South Cambs District Council, where our new draft local plan has determined that local need is higher than the government's minimum target because we're in an area of high growth and we're requiring higher standards future-proofed against climate change. We really don't want to see people forced further out of the area by the lack of housing and the high prices, with the huge impacts of long commutes in terms of cost, childcare, the family impacts we've been hearing about, and also the climate impacts with carbon emissions of commuting. But we don't need a target to do this. This has been done, just as Amendment 1 proposes, by objectively assessing housing need at local level, consulting widely on it, and then ensuring we meet the need. Localism, democracy, and environmentalism. Now, we've heard how young people particularly feel excluded from these consultations with established communities, and that the lack of a national target shows us as NIMBY. So that is where consultations need to be creative and radical, reaching out to those who normally don't get to have a voice, to the young and to residents of the future. And yes, local government does have hard-earned experience that top-down targets don't build houses. They actually take powers away from local councils, and they send a message to developers, not to voters, as Stephen suggested. They fuel speculative development and higher land prices, because this is a failed market system, not a simple supply-demand equation, because houses are no longer just places to live. They are assets for investors. There's land that is being banked, feeding greed rather than need. So experience does show that local assessed need and neighbourhood plans lead to more houses being built, meeting housing need in the right places. So conference, please support both parts of the amendment and then support the motion. I can't really understand the way the amendment's been cut into two, because we need both parts. We need mass state building of social housing and the greater percentage of social housing of all housing need. And we need that programme of apprenticeships to ensure the workforce, which doesn't exist at the moment, as Stephen has quite rightly said. But we also need to penalise developers rather than councils for not building out. And we need to future-proof homes against extreme weather events. So council, please accept the amendment that has been so articulately put forward by Sarah, by Prue, and by others this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pippa. And I now call to summate on the motion as a whole, Laura Gordon from Sheffield. Laura.
Thank you. There were some wonderful speeches there and a fantastic debate. So thank you so much to all of those who put in cards and who spoke in the motion. I find myself in a slightly awkward position here because some people who I enormously respect in the party as campaigners and policy thinkers have made some wonderful speeches, and I find myself now completely disagreeing with them. But I think we probably agree on more than we disagree with, and I hope we will continue to agree on many things in future. Look, most of the discussion has focused on whether or not we need housing targets. And many of the speakers have pointed out correctly that housing targets do not solve the problem and do not lead to a single house being built. But that's what the rest of the motion is for. The target is an expression of ambition of where we want to get to, and the rest of the motion is about how we do it. Housing targets now in our failed system might give power to developers, but the rest of the motion is trying to address that broken planning system. So it doesn't make sense to remove the target simply because it's not working now. We have to think about whether it can work in the system that we are hoping to build with the rest of this motion. Similarly, Prue, in her talking about her experience in Wokingham, talked about how the successive governments have failed to meet the targets that they have set themselves. And again, that's true, but I just don't think that that's a reason to say that we shouldn't have a target. We should have, if anything, that's a reason to have a target, because we have to say, actually, not only do we have this target, we're going to maintain this target, but also through our wider housing policy that we're setting out in this motion, we're setting out how we're going to deliver that target. It's not something that's unmoored from anything else. By the strength of this motion, what this motion does is demonstrate how we will deliver it. And that is what makes the Liberal Democrats different. We are ambitious, but we are also realistic. And this motion provides a realistic path to developing that target. Tom talked about his experience as a councillor and as a recent first-time buyer, where they've been able to reframe growth in housing as a positive and as building communities, building homes for people who desperately need them. And many of the other speakers touched on similar issues. Stephen in particular talking about their experience as a council that is successfully building homes. But Stephen made what I think is an excellent point, which is that for every council, Joe's council is another wonderful example. The Eastleigh Liberal Democrats, led by the aptly named Keith House, are an even better example, where we have these examples of wonderful councils that are consistently delivering homes for people in their areas who need them. But unfortunately, there are other councils that aren't able to do that. And that's where the national target is important. It offers a way to hold some of those councils to account and put pressure on them to develop a plan under the new powers that we are offering them with this motion to develop those targets. Finally, I think Oliver made an excellent point, conjuring up his vision of Davy Mania in the election, where Ed Davey comes on stage, having inspired a national movement, and is then asked, well, how many homes are you going to build? And isn't able to answer it. And I think that does represent a real fear. And this is where I think Dorothy Thornhill, who is one of our foremost campaigners, is wrong about whether or not this would be on our leaflet. Because for so many young people, and by young people, I mean, by the way, anyone under about 40, so actually, sadly, not that young anymore, this is one of the most important issues, if not the most important issues, that will determine their future prosperity. They want to see us setting ambitious targets for house building and for addressing the wider crisis in our housing market, the housing emergency that Joe referenced. I think we do need to have that number because we will put it on our leaflets and not because the Tories will use it to hit us. I think on the contrary, the Tories would hit us if we took it out. So please vote for the motion as a whole. Please vote against the first half of Amendment 1 and for the second half of Amendment 1.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. OK, conference, we're now moving to a series of 3 votes. As I said before, we're taking Amendment 1 in 2 parts. So the first vote will be on lines 1 to 20 of the amendment, for or against. Then we'll vote on lines 21 to 29 of the amendment, for or against. And then we'll vote on the main motion as amended or not, as the case may be. So the first vote, and I'm opening it in your polls tab now, is on the first part of Amendment 1, lines 1 to 20 of Amendment 1. These are the parts of the amendment that remove lines 38 to 40 in the motion, the reference to national targets, and add some words after line 14 as well. So you can either vote for or against that amendment. Please do so now. Thank you very much, Conference. I can announce the result of that vote on the first part of Amendment 1. They voted for that part of the amendment 177, and they voted against 199. So the first part of Amendment 1 is defeated. We're now moving on to the vote on the second part of Amendment 1. That's line 21 to 29 in the amendment, which adds various parts of text to the motion and changes the reference to land. So now please vote for or against that part of Amendment 1 in your polls tab now. Thank you very much, Conference. The result of the vote on the second part of Amendment 1 was in favour 299, and against 48. So that part is very clearly carried. So we are now moving on to a vote on the main motion, which is amended by the second part of Amendment 1 only. And we're going to open that vote in your polls tab, so please cast your vote now. Thank you very much, Conference. I can announce the result of the vote on the motion as amended. They voted for the motion 343, and against 38. So that motion as amended by the second part of Amendment 1 is very clearly carried. Thank you very much to everyone who spoke in the debate. Sorry we couldn't call absolutely everyone, and I'm sorry, Conference, for overrunning the finish time. I hope you'll understand and appreciate the reasons why. That concludes Conference for today, though there are some activities going on in the fringe, so please take a look there. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow morning for the start of Conference again. Thank you. Have a good evening. And thank you to my aides. Thanks very much.
Good evening, and welcome on behalf of Liberal Democrat Creative Network to tonight's concert. Before we get to the music, I'm delighted to be joined by one of our hard-working peers, Paul Strasberger, plus on video, a genuine international rock star. But firstly, a brief word about the Liberal Democrat Creative Network. We're a volunteer group working to promote the interests of all those working in the creative industries. We liaise with a hard-working and highly respected group of parliamentarians who make up our DCMS team. So please contact us with ideas for campaigns or issues affecting the creative industries in your area. Details of how to contact us will shortly be appearing on the chat. We also hope to put on events when it's safe to do so. So if you sign up, we'll let you know. In the meantime, LDCN is also putting on another event tomorrow night. Cracking Up the Conference, an evening of comedy in which you will get to vote on the best comedian. Be there and do it. Now, Paul Strausenberger is with us tonight to talk about one of the major campaigns being fought by our DCMS team. Paul has led a very high-profile fight to try and overturn one of Brexit's many disastrous effects on the creative industries. Paul, if you can explain your campaign and then introduce an excerpt from your Zoom meeting, and we'll take questions at the end if there's any time. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Charles. And I realise I'm just the support act for the band you've really come to see. So I'll be quick and I'll give you a short update on this important campaign. The creative arts sector covers all types of musicians, dancers, actors, the fashion industry, trade shows and many more. If you include all the designers and engineers and roadies and drivers, the security staff and the rest, it employs 2 million people and turns over £111 billion a year. It involves 1 in 8 UK companies and it's genuinely world leading. And it's been totally shafted by Brexit. To be more exact, it was completely left out of the botched EU trade deal negotiated by David Frost and the Prime Minister last year, which means that our largest sector after financial services has been subjected to a catastrophic no-deal Brexit, the hardest possible Brexit. As a result, none except the richest performers and companies can still afford to tour in Europe or take paid engagements in EU countries because they can't afford the new costs for every member of their team and can't find a way through the masses of new red tape, which, by the way, is different for each country they visit. For many emerging artists, European tours are where they used to get half their income and where they learnt their trade and developed their careers. They can't make up the missing half of their money in the UK, so for many it will mean that their artistic career can't support them anymore and they will be lost to the industry and to their audiences. And as well as losing out culturally and economically, the UK is giving up a big chunk of the soft power that our preeminent creative industries used to deliver, another nail in the coffin of so-called global Britain. The Lib Dems have long been big supporters of the creative arts, so it's no surprise that our peers and MPs have been very busy working to fix this screw-up. We've asked more than 20 questions in both Houses of Parliament. We've written many newspaper articles and linked up with A-list celebrities to get this subject into newspapers and onto TV. I'm trying at the moment to arrange a meeting for Sir Elton John to meet Maurice Johnson. Elton is a passionate supporter of young emerging artists who are the ones who are most affected by this mess. Elton and I have already met with Lord Frost and also with Michel Barnier, who was very supportive. I'm going to show you a couple of clips from the Barnier meeting, which haven't been seen in public before. Elton is accompanied by David Furnish, who is his husband and his business manager. Can we run the video, please?
Yeah, Michelle, thank you so much, as I said, for joining us today. I wanted to talk to you because what has happened with Brexit has meant that all musicians, and especially young musicians, that are trying to have a career and tour in Europe and to the EU countries, are finding it impossible now because of what's happened, because of the work that goes into getting a visa. It's financially impossible for them, logistically impossible for them. It's okay for people of my caliber because I can afford, I have the team to put those things in order for me. But what has happened is we've hit a complete roadblock. And I've been playing piano since I was 4 or 5 years old. My whole life has been spent in music. And I feel very, very passionate about the fact that the arts brings people together so much. Like sport, music, theatre, cinema, dance, whatever. It brings nations together. And when I was young, I came to France and I played, and I went to Germany, I went to Holland, and I learned so much. And this is being taken away from the young people and people who earn a living just by playing live. Nowadays, in this, Monsieur Lord Frost said that it was okay for me to speak because in 1975, there was no Brexit. But in 1975, people were earning a lot of money from recordings. That doesn't happen so much anymore unless you're a world top-selling artist. People earn money from playing live concerts, and they learn their craft by doing live concerts, and they learn their art. And I was wanted to talk to you and find, is there any kind of a solution that we can find to make this thing possible? I mean, the government in Britain have, more or less said, no, it's not our fault, it's the EU, which of course is their stock answer. But I was wondering, by talking to you, who've had so much experience in this field in the EU, whether we can try and, sport, for example, sport is something that teams come and go, players come and go without any problem. People in the arts don't have that. And it's because I suppose sport has UEFA, FIFA, and certain organizations that can do that for them. If there was an association set up in Europe or in Britain for people within the arts, would that make it any easier? I'm clutching at straws. I'm not a politician. I'm an artist, and I've had the most wonderful life because of it. And I've toured every single Brexit country, every EU country I've been to and played to, and been welcomed with open arms. And for me, it's just a frustrating thing. And I've tried to talk to the government in Britain, and now I'm talking to you because I think you'll be far more reasonable or easier to talk to.
I guess the one other point, we're very frustrated by Brexit. We were very anti the whole thing. Elton and I, we have a family home in France. We have a small flat in Italy. We very much love Europe and the whole concept. We don't feel the world will solve its problems unless we pull together. And so we're viewing this as a roadblock that hopefully in time, with a younger generation of people coming through, they can see the wisdom in us pulling back together again. And it's the young musicians and the young people gathering, that soft ambassadorship, that opportunity for cultures to unite will be lost if these young artists can't tour. And that's what we think is one of the best ways to paint a brighter future for a post-Brexit world that we would love to see happen in our children's lifetimes. And if we lose that musical ambassadorship, we're losing an opportunity to stay connected. And it's the young artists who are suffering the most. So I just wanted to add that as well.
So I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk with you. And to be frank, I've been looking forward to it. Elton, I hear what you say, and the issue you raise mean a lot to many, many people, and in particular for me. And I can share totally because you are an artist, the fact that in the global world where we are, music, culture, and sport are a key issue to try to create unity and more cohesion between the people. Fundamentally, what this comes down to is that the UK chose to leave the EU. It is the key point. It is a choice that many, many of us regret, including me personally. And to be frank, nobody until now, nobody has been able to give me any kind of proof of the added value of Brexit. Even Mr. Farage, when I met Farage in my office at his request 2 or 3 years ago, he was unable to give me any proof of the added value of the Brexit. And I have yet to hear someone explain me the benefit of the Brexit. But we always respected that choice. It was a democratic choice of a majority of UK citizens. It's democracy, and even member states have to be free to make this kind of determination. Also, Elton, the UK government then chose the Brexit it wanted. It was a global and comprehensive Brexit, not only leaving the EU, but leaving the single market and leaving the custom union. And leaving the single market, it is my point to answer to your point. Leaving the single market, that means that they end the free movement of persons. And to be frank, I had in face of me the last team with Johnson, David Frost, and many others were always in a kind of rhetoric, kind of dogmatism about sovereignty. They give me everyday lessons of sovereignty. I don't need lessons of sovereignty, to be frank, because as you know, probably I'm a Gaullist for a long time, so I know what means sovereignty. And what is at stake when we speak about Europe is to make our national sovereignty solidaire. But they gave me every day lessons of sovereignty, which is not very useful. But this kind of dogmatism, this kind of rhetoric about sovereignty was the daily line of negotiation of the UK. And when they spoke about sovereignty, they were speaking about to end the free movement of persons. This last point, ending the free movement of persons, was repeated by the UK, and I'm sure that you heard it in public statements and in the media, and portrayed as one of the main benefits of Brexit. Taking back control. It was the daily rhetoric of Frost and his team. So I regret it, but the UK was very determined on that point all through the negotiations. And to answer to you very simply, this UK government attitude is also why we don't have a proper chapter on mobility in the EU-UK agreement. I have proposed the name of the EU, the 27 member states, and the Parliament, which is very tough on this point. We have proposed a proper chapter on mobility, and the answer of the UK government was no. This UK government attitude is also why we don't have visa-free travel, for the same reason. And these UK choices are also the reason why we don't have an exemption for UK artists when doing paid activities.
Yes, I think we're moving over to Paul now, who's going to follow up about what's happened since that meeting.
Yeah, well, he's a charming man, isn't he, Michel Barnier? So far, the government isn't budging, and so this autumn the gloves are coming off. We're planning some interesting publicity stunts to put pressure on Mr. Johnson to make another of his U-turns and fix this problem. And this is where you can help, because bearing in mind that we have access to many famous performers to help us, can you try and come up with some wacky ideas for publicity stunts to get this issue onto the front pages and into Boris Johnson's head? If so, please direct message me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @LordStras, LORDSTRAS, @LordStras. And back to you, Charles. Thank you very much.
Paul, before you go, just sort of one clarification. I mean, in a way, what Barnier was saying, and as I understand the position, but please help me and the conference, is that, of course, there is a way of having European artists work here and vice versa without visas and all of the above. But it's because this government is terrified that somehow or other, if you give a 3-month visa to a singer from Spain or whatever, that they might run loose and become illegal immigrants or something. Is that the core of it?
The EU proposed what they call a mobility chapter, which would have allowed artists from the EU and artists from the UK to travel within each other's countries on a strictly temporary basis, and it would be strictly limited to certain professions. And the UK government turned it down flat. And the only explanation they've given us so far is that doing that would have breached their manifesto commitment in 2019 to take back control of the borders. Of course, that's rubbish, because they're trying to treat this as an immigration issue. And as you said, it's not. A singer goes over to France and Germany and Spain for a few weeks and does some gigs, and comes home. He doesn't set up home there. So it's not an immigration issue; it's a trade issue, and we've got to get that point home in this campaign.
I also understand that it damages the chances of British musicians and other performers getting visas to work in America if they have no proof that they've managed to work overseas before. Is that true?
I haven't heard that one, to be honest, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your help tonight. I don't know whether there are any questions that are particularly pertinent. I think with the evening overrunning a bit, Paul, as you said, you've given your address for people to approach you direct. I think they should do that. I hope you do send in ideas, because Paul and the team at DCMS are doing a fantastic job, but they're always keen to get new ideas from party members.
The wackier the better.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you, Paul, for that. Now it's time for the concert, which the Liberal Democrat Creative Network are delighted to bring to the conference. It's a performance by some of the very young musicians that Sir Elton was talking about, musicians who might now be working in Europe, but are not. They should be touring there. Anyway, here are the Untold Orchestra, introduced by one of their founders, Sam Davis. Hope you enjoy the show, and tune in tomorrow night also to Cracking Up the Conference. Over to Sam Davis.
Hi, I'm Sam Davis. I'm one of the directors of the Untold Orchestra. We are a Manchester-based organisation set on making the orchestral world more accessible to communities across Greater Manchester and further afield. We do this through engaging exciting performances, through offering community workshops, and through collaborating with different artists and art forms. Especially for your conference, we recorded some of our recent performance, Abbey Road, an orchestral rendition, celebrating the iconic Beatles album Abbey Road. We hope you enjoy it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Abbey Road. so hard to see come together right now over me.
Dancing crew in the corner over here.
Joan was quizzical, studied pataphysical science in the home. Late nights all alone with a test tube. Oh, 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 oh. Maxwell medicine, Adrian in medicine calls her on the phone. Can I take you out to the picture, Joe? Oh, oh, oh. As she's getting ready to go road. A knock comes on the door. Bang, bang, Maxwell's silver hammer came down upon her head. Bang, bang, Maxwell's silver hammer made sure that she was dead. Looks nice out there. Back in school again, Maxwell plays the fool again. Teacher gets annoyed, wishing to avoid an unpleasant scene. She tells Max to stay when the class has gone away, so he waits behind, writing 50 times, I must not be so. But when she turns her back on the boy, he creeps up from behind. Bang, bang, Max's silver hammer came down upon her head. Bang, bang, Max's silver hammer made sure that she was dead. We caught a dirty one. Maxwell stands alone, painting testimonial pictures. Oh, 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 oh. Rose and Valerie screaming from the gallery, say he must go free. The judge does not agree and he tells them oh, 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 oh. But as the words are leaving his lips, a noise comes from behind. Bang, bang, Maxwell's silver hammer came down upon his head. Bang, bang, Maxwell's silver hammer made sure that he was dead. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, die if you leave me. I'll never do you no harm. Believe me when I tell you
On to the next one.
On to the next one. How are we doing, everybody? We all right? That's good timing, because it's Ringo's song now. I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade. He let us in, knows where we've been, in his octopus's garden in the shade. I'd ask my friends to come and see an octopus's garden with me. I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade. We would be warm below the storm in our little hideaway beneath the waves, resting our head on the seabed in an octopus's garden near a cave. We would sing and dance around because we know we can't be found. I'd like to be spot on under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade. Help! Shout and swim about the coral that lies beneath the waves. Oh, what a joy for every girl and boy, knowing that they're happy and they're safe. We would be so happy, you and me, no one there to tell us what to do. I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden with you. In an octopus's garden with you. In an octopus's garden with you. Peace and love, man. Peace and love.
We're warning you with peace and love.
All right, this will be the end of side A then. For all you hardcore fans out there. I want you so bad, babe. I want you so bad. It's driving me mad. It's driving me mad. I want you so bad, babe. I want you so bad. It's driving me mad. It's driving me. I want you so bad, babe. I want you so bad. It's driving me mad. It's driving me. I want you so bad, babe. I want you so bad. It's driving me mad. It's driving
Well, Jacques on vocals, everyone.
How about that string section, by the way? Ferocious, man. Right, and that side, eh? Quick as a flash, who knew? Let's get to the juicy stuff now. Sound good?
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, the smiles will turn into the faces. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, I feel the ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright.
It's alright, everybody.
It's alright.
It's alright.
Lovely.